Traveling to Consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I'm your host, Clayton, and today we are joined by an extremely special guest. His name is Dr. Rick Kiper. If you haven't heard of him, he's a retired FBI agent, a retired FBI special agent. Can't forget the special in there. He's been a computer forensic examiner for over 20 years. Has a ton of cybersecurity certificates. It looks like over 13. He has 5 degrees, computer science and education. So whenever it comes to technology, this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. And I think it's going to be a great follow-up from our conversation with Alan Dershowitz the other day. So without further delay, Dr. Kiper, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor.
Well, it's an honor and privilege for me to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, in this information, like this idea, I think just of that, let's say government agencies could want to plant information or, let's say do mischievous things against Americans. It feels like this kind of goes against like things that Americans would want to believe or think is even possible to happen in our government.
Right. I mean, a lot of us that signed up for the FBI, I would say the grand majority of folks who signed up for the FBI believe that they're doing the right thing and that they're signing up for the right reasons. They want to help fight terrorism, secure a country, put bad guys in jail, whatever. And then let's see, 2013. So that would have been 14 years into the FBI. I became a whistleblower. I raised my hand at the FBI Academy, identified, significant waste, fraud, and abuse. And I raised it to my direct supervisor. I was a unit chief, GS-13 unit chief at the time. And raised it to my section chief and my deputy assistant director and my assistant director. And I found myself in the crosshairs of an unscheduled inspection from our inspection division. And they came down and wrote a bunch of demonstrably fictitious, reports about me, and ended up kicking me out of training division. And I got a demotion, 2 GS level demotion, got kicked back down to a special agent. And it was a pretty egregious thing that they did, and there was no safeguards against it. And that was the first time I was like, what did I get myself into? I mean, the FBI is the motto is fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And there's like no integrity. It's like fidelity, bravery, and never mind. And it was so egregious. It was so obvious what they did that it got the attention of Senator Chuck Grassley. And he invited me to come testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee against the FBI for whistleblower retaliation. And so when he received my information, and there were others, I mean, I wasn't the only one retaliated against in the FBI, but my case was so egregious. He sent 2 letters to the FBI requesting information, and they basically ignored him. And he said, okay, we're going to have a hearing, a public hearing. And so the deputy director, Kevin Perkins at the time, came. He had to come testify. He invited me to testify. And as a result of this hearing, which was March of 2015, it's still on C-SPAN, by the way. I send people a link to it because it was a great experience, actually. But as a result of my testimony and my follow-up involvement with the committee, I kept contact with them And as a result of that, they crafted a new law called the FBI Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act of 2016, and it was passed unanimously by both houses. So there's a tolerance to a point, but then both sides of the aisle were just really outraged about what happened, not just in my case, but in general, what the FBI leadership is capable of doing. And part of the result of this, or part of the law, is basically anyone in the FBI can make a protected disclosure to anyone in their chain of command, from their supervisor all the way up, and directly to Congress. And so this is why you're seeing all of a sudden a bunch of FBI employees going directly to Congress, with Jim Jordan's committee and so forth. So that's a result of what I had to go through when I made a protected disclosure to my section chief and deputy assistant director and assistant director. According to statute, according to 28 CFR 27.1A, that wasn't the correct procedure. I would have had to have gone directly to the deputy director or the director himself, because I belong to a headquarters division. And based on that, I didn't get any relief or remedy in my situation. But I take solace in the fact that going forward, a lot of employees in the FBI are now coming forward on the abuses.
No, that's absolutely great. I mean, and it sounds like you were a trailblazer in that regard. And if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like that Capitol Hill meeting would have probably been March either 12th or 16th at 2015. So if people are trying to look up for a specific date.
Yes, I think it was March 4th. I think it was March 4th of 2015. If you just go to C-SPAN and look for FBI whistleblower retaliation, it'll pop right up.
Okay. Well, we can dig into that in a bit then. But I'm really interested then in maybe in your specific situation, right? Of like, we kind of got the high level overview of, there was waste, fraud, abuse. You brought that to your management. They basically had an investigation that then pinned extra information, or let's say alleged information against you, or illegal activity, whatever it would have been. Maybe it wasn't illegal, but like discriminatory things. I mean, are you able to go into like maybe more detail of like, that process of what you went through as a whistleblower, from like what
Sure.
you saw, then reporting, and then the chain of events from there?
So just to give you an example, at the time when I was unit chief at the FBI Academy, my unit was called the Investigative Training Unit. And so I was in charge of the curriculum and the supervisors who were instructors of the new agents and new analysts in certain areas of their training. For example, financial crimes, cybersecurity, white-collar crime, counterterrorism, domestic terrorism, and so forth. So that unit was due to transfer into a brand new building that was being built. We were going to share that building with another intelligence unit. And the building, as it was being planned and constructed, it was being constructed as the whole building as something called a SCIF. Do you know what a SCIF is?
I've heard the name before, but I'm drawing a blank on what it is.
It's think of it as kind of a super secret place, protected place within a building that so everybody who works for the FBI needs top secret clearance. Okay, so you have that top secret clearance, but then you have additional clearances you can obtain in order to get into secret compartmentalized information. And the secret compartmentalized information facility that can handle that kind of information is called a SCIF. And so usually it's just a section of a building. They have special procedures for going in. You can't bring your cell phone in. It's very restrictive. Every embassy, every U.S. embassy has a skiff where the country team of that in that United States embassy can talk freely in that space. It has physical protections against people listening, and but anyway, it's this whole building. Okay, for the first time ever, we're going to have a whole building that's a skiff. And the justification for that they told me was that we want to, be able to handle training people in this environment. And of course, if you're training people on top secret information, you need to be training them in a skiff in this way. Um, so, every system that we use, it's either unclassified, it's classified up to secret, which is most of the FBI internal network, communication network. And then there's a separate network for top secret information. So we call it, the green network for like internet and unclassified, red network, which is the classified network up to secret, and then the yellow network, which is top secret. Okay. But it's very rare. It's actually very rare, believe it or not, for us to handle top secret information. I mean, it's the typical FBI employee, including agents. The grand majority of them do not deal with top secret information on a regular basis. It's just very, very controlled. So for us to move our unit from this, this regular, let's call it a regular environment, into the skiff building would put so many additional requirements on my unit and the supervisors that worked for me, the teachers. And, teachers meet with students. Nobody can bring in their cell phone. It just creates all kinds of problems. And it's wasteful because I asked the facilities management, director of the FBI Academy. He had been there for 15 years, and I asked him, how many top secret training classes have you given in this space and in the whole FBI Academy? And he said 1 in 15 years. So I said, why are we making an entire building to accommodate this training that we almost never give? So I raised this issue because we're talking like a $6 million additional cost to making this whole building a skiff. And plus you have all of the additional requirements for the people like me and my unit going in there every single day and having to deal with the restrictions. And by the way, they wanted me to offer my GS-14 level supervisory special agents to be escorts to workers that came in and had to work on the AC or the roof, because you have to have a top secret skiff, with all those additional skiff requirements. You had to have somebody like that to be able to escort somebody who does not have those clearances. And so now you're talking about paying, a GS-14, in the area of, $80 an hour to be an escort for all these people. And anyway, there was no reason to do it. It was so costly, so wasteful. And I wrote up like a little white paper on it and sent it up the chain. I was like, this is ridiculous. It's the definition of government waste.
Yeah.
Okay. That was one thing. Another thing was, there was a plan by the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. There was a proposal by them to move new agent training from the FBI Academy to a facility in Georgia called FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. That's where every other federal agency trains their special agents, except for the FBI and the DEA. FBI, DEA are at Quantico, Virginia, at the FBI Academy, that area. But all the rest of them, Secret Service, DHS, all of them, the rest of them are trained at this one facility in Georgia, the FLETC Center. And so OMB wanted to move new agent training down there to save money. They said, we can. They're bean counters, they're trying to save money where they can. Well, the 7th floor, which is the when we talk about the 7th floor in the FBI, the 7th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building, which is where all the FBI executives work, they told OMB that we can't move new agent training to this new center because new agent training was inextricably intertwined with new analyst training. And so to rip the new agents away and train them at FLETC with all the rest of the special agents in the federal government, well, that would just break our training to pieces because we're inextricably intertwined. That was a complete lie.
That's a complete lie.
It was a complete lie, and I have the emails to back it up. And I told them when one of our section chiefs at the FBI Academy said, I know this isn't the best way to handle this. This isn't the best training strategy, but the people on the 7th floor have already told OMB that we have new agents training with new analysts together in the same environment. And so basically the section chief was asking about how can we do it after the fact, because OMB is going to send somebody down to the FBI Academy to observe how our training is inextricably intertwined.
Yeah.
And so the conspiracy was then crafted to then take new agents and new analysts and put their butts in seats together in a classroom as a show for OMB. The ones that wanted to take new agents out and send them to Georgia's facility.
Why would they want to lie about this? Why do they want to keep the special agent training in Quantico?
It's all about power and influence. So if you take it away from the folks at the FBI Academy, and the FBI Academy is actually part of the FBI's training division, which is part of the FBI's. They're divided in kind of larger. You have divisions, and the divisions come under an executive assistant director for administration. So they all didn't want to give that up, and when they supervise such things, they want to be able to just either drive over to the FBI Academy, or they wanted it to be nice and convenient there instead of sending our new agents to FLETC, which I understand is a wonderful facility. They had room for us. They had plans to build the new FBI Academy on the premises so that we can all, share the same training facilities as federal agents. I was very neutral on the issue. I really didn't care either way. But what I did care about is lying to another federal agency. So I raised my hand and I said, this is problematic, what we're proposing to do here. And so that was another reason, So these are the things that I raised, and all, with a paper trail. And then I found myself in the crosshairs, like I said, of this inspection. Usually a division is inspected every 3 years in the FBI, unless they're called for special purposes to do an inspection. And that's what happened. Inspection division was called down, my unit, a couple of other units, just to make it, I guess, look like a legitimate inspection. But it wasn't a division-wide inspection like it usually is. They were there to take me out, and it was obvious. And because I did not...
Real quick,
Yeah.
Is this all because of just those 2 white papers?
Well, there were other things. Another issue that I brought up was the fact that as the training division, we did not have a documented business process. Believe it or not, that was the topic of my dissertation, by the way, is business processes in large organizations and how to coordinate training information and connect them with business processes so you can track both. Okay, so that was another complaint. That was more of an inefficiency complaint. Like the division was not like nobody knew who did what, and it was just a mess all the time, and everybody did what they could to throw together training. But I have 4 degrees in training. Apart from, I have 4 degrees in education. Apart from a second master's degree in information security engineering, and then all of the technical certifications in cybersecurity and digital forensics that you mentioned before, I really live in both worlds, in the world of education and training and the world of cybersecurity and digital forensics. And so that was something else that I had a problem with and that I raised to my management there. So, there wasn't a defined process. I even offered to help them build the process, the documented process, so that when people are being cycled in and out of there, you had some stability, some continuity that could be relied upon. But anyway, they didn't want to hear it. These are, members of what we call the Senior Executive Service, SESers, the people at the top, senior managers of the FBI, and they don't want to hear about what can be improved. They don't want to hear about the problems. They just want people to say yes, put your head down, work.
Why do you feel like that is? Why do you feel like in these agencies that, and I mean anywhere, because I see this as like leadership is so important,
Yes.
especially if we're talking about efficiency, if we're talking about, especially when it comes to something the taxpayer dollars, like what would prevent them from actually wanting to improve something? Because and just to project a little, like I feel like if I'm going to improve something, it's going to look better on me. Maybe it boosts my ego a little, like more praise from other people. So like, what is it that's preventing these people from wanting to do something, make things better?
I think most of it is just ego. And I'll tell you a story in a little bit of another theory, but I think that leadership, especially leadership in these law enforcement organizations like the FBI, if there's a good idea and it's not their idea, it's not a good idea.
Mm.
Because everything is about moving up, right? Is about getting the next job, getting the next promotion. And if it's not something that you personally can take credit for, then it's they dismiss it.
That's not good.
I don't know if you knew, in the FBI, in order to move up, you start as a special agent. I'll just talk special agent for right now. You're assigned to a field office. You spend a few years there, and you can apply to be a supervisor at headquarters. Okay, so you have to move from wherever you are to headquarters. And then you spend a couple of years there, you can apply to be a field supervisor in another field office. So you move your family there. After a few years, you can apply to be a unit chief at a headquarters division. So you got to go back to DC. And then you can apply to be a section chief in the field. I'm sorry, assistant special agent in charge of a field office. So you go to a third field office and work for a couple of years, and then you can apply to be a section chief back at headquarters, go back to headquarters. Then you can apply to be a special agent in charge of a small office, go back out to the field. And then you can apply to be a deputy assistant director, go back to headquarters. You can apply to be a large office special agent in charge, go back to the field. Then you can apply to be a assistant director and go back to headquarters. So imagine the kind of person that would do that to their family.
Yeah.
Okay.
It has to
and
be
for
all about
special
them.
agents, you got to do it before you're 57, because that's when you get kicked out.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah. And a lot of them get to those higher levels and have lost their family, have lost everything, become very embittered. I was speaking to, the story I was going to share with you is in the Miami field office. I was speaking to a counselor. I wasn't there for counseling, but I went to his office because he's a friend of mine. He's a counselor for the Employee Assistance Program in the FBI. I'll call him Jack. I don't want to get him in trouble. But I went to Jack's office, and we were talking about, this, we've both known people who are good people at the field office level. I mean, as we say in the FBI, we've gone through the door together. We've executed arrest warrants and search warrants together. We've done these things, and they're good people. And then they start on this, going up to headquarters kind of thing. And by the time they get up to like a deputy assistant director or so, they've lost their minds. I mean, it's like they're completely different people, and they make bad decisions for everybody under them.
Yeah.
And they're very egotistical, and they're very selfish. And this guy Jack was telling me, he said, you know what, I really believe as a Christian, we were both Christian, I really believe that there is a spiritual problem with FBI headquarters. I really believe that. And I believe there's a spirit of confusion and of corruption there, that if you're exposed to it too much, it changes you.
Wow.
So I thought that was, it's a fair theory, as good as anything else, I guess.
No, I mean, and I always obviously this podcast is about consciousness, and I'm very spiritual in my own right. So I know that's an interesting little gap there. I mean, there's a spiritual problem within the FBI. Like how do you think that is, let's say, manifesting? Is that due to this nature of needing to leave and come back? Do you think it's subconscious? Like what could be fixed about it? Like, I'm interested in your thoughts there.
Well, first of all, I think the way that you promote people within the FBI has to change. So, as I said before, I think once you get up to the higher levels of the FBI, and you have to get there as soon as you can, because the average FBI agent comes in at the age of 30. That's the average. The minimum is 23, but you have to be 23, but you also have to have a 4-year degree and plus 3 years of professional experience to be eligible to be an FBI agent. So you're really starting, and like I said, the average is 30. That's what most people, special agents, come in. So from 30 to 57 when they kick you out as a what we call an 1811, that's the job family. You have 27 years, right? And I don't know, actually I never bothered counting how many times you got to move to get up to that spot, a leadership position of the FBI. But you got to do it a lot, and it takes a toll on your family, and most that get up to that level, like I said, have lost their family. They've gone through divorces. They're on their second or third wife or whatever. There was a guy who was, and they call someone who goes up very fast, they call him a blue flamer. Okay, someone that's got a blue flame going like a rocket ship up to the top. And there was a executive assistant director at headquarters. This is in the early 2000s. And he was suspected of having an affair with a secretary who was a former Miss South Carolina. Okay. And it was like an open secret kind of. And finally it got to the director, who was Bob Mueller at the time. And Mueller, the story goes, Mueller brought him into his office and asked him about this affair. And he denied it. And then Bob Mueller put in remember VHS tapes? He put in a VHS tape of the CCTV cameras in the J. Edgar Hoover building, parking lot that's below the building. And there was this executive and his secretary on top of his car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Bob Mueller turned to this guy and said, "Pack your stuff, you're gone." Okay. To his credit. Okay. He fired the guy.
Yeah.
But there are so many people up at that level that are just devoid of a true north. They're so devoid of the concept of right and wrong. If you watch these people as they testify in Congress, Director Wray himself, James Comey, the deputy directors that he sends, Paul Abate, these people that go there. If you remember Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, remember the thing they had with the cell phones, texting each other. That is, well, I'll tell you about that too. After that became public, Director Ray told Congress, we're going to take care of this problem. And what he did is he promoted Peter Strzok to be Deputy Assistant Director of Human Resources Division. Okay. And he gave all 33,000 FBI employees corporate training on how to do what those two knuckleheads were doing. And that is texting each other on bureau phones about the subject of an investigation. Regular special agents coming out of Quantico, they beat it into our heads. We never, ever talk about the subject of our investigation. You can talk about it, but don't put it into a text or an email or any other document that you don't want to be provided in discovery or produced in discovery in court, because it's all discoverable. We all know this.
Yeah.
But we all had to get trained on not to do it because two executives at the top were caught doing it. So these executives circled the wagons. If they ever get in trouble, they circle the wagons, and their solution is, well, everybody needs to get trained on this. And then there's no accountability. That's something else that needs to change, is that there has to be real consequences for people, especially at the top, that have, larger, span of control, larger responsibilities. They need to be held accountable for malfeasance. And it's just not happening. And so if you're not holding them accountable, you're going to get more of the same. And and that's, it just makes the whole organization, it just kills the morale in the organization when that happens.
100%. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that kept poking in my mind, this idea of accountability and responsibility, and even transparency at some level. Because you see it time and time again, whether it's large corporations, whether it's FBI, whether it's CIA, whether it's even congressmen and women. It seems, at least as a common man or from the American people, the US citizens, there's never accountability. It seems like, anytime I hear a court hearing and all of the evidence, whether some of it's manufactured or not, I don't know, but all the evidence points to wrongdoing. It's like, okay, great. Yeah, we know. And then the congressmen and women will get up there, they'll point their fingers, they'll yell at them. And it's like, yeah, great. But we know that this person isn't going to jail. I think Hillary Clinton was a perfect example with her emails, which
Yes.
From a cybersecurity, I'm sure you could talk about, but it seems like there's never accountability, right? It's the whole rules for thee, but not for me mentality. Do you ever see that changing? What are some issues and what are some solutions that could fix that?
Ooh, well, if they actually put in new policies that would help enforce the accountability, that would be good. The FBI has a program like other federal agencies called OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility. So this is when, if you get caught soliciting a prostitute, or a DUI, right? Some believe it or not, you'd be very surprised to learn about, the different things that happen with FBI employees, people stealing drugs out of the drug vault and money out of the valuable vault. It just goes on and on. And the Office of Professional Responsibility does have tables that define each violation and what the consequences, what the minimum consequence is, what the maximum consequence is, and they do give a lot of adverse consequence to those who lie under oath. I mean, that's something that there's like no tolerance for whatsoever. But a lot of times these other things that they get caught in, lying on documents, like in my case, it was obvious they were obviously lying on these documents. One of the things I was accused of, for example, was as a leadership deficiency as a unit chief, that I had taken a one of my instructors out of instruction. Like, okay, you can't teach anymore because of what I observed him teaching in the classroom. And then I gave that person an outstanding review. Okay, that's what I was accused of. Okay, well, when you read the report, they named the wrong person. I indeed did take a supervisor out of the classroom and put him on administrative duties, curriculum development duties, because of what I saw. But it was the wrong person in the report. They went to the file and they saw the outstanding report that I gave on the guy that they named, but that's not the guy that I removed. And I tell you, that guy was upset when he was named, but they wouldn't change it. They wouldn't change it. And it was so obviously made up, or the mistakes. I think a mistake, if you let it go long enough, okay, maybe some of these things are mistakes, but then if you don't correct the mistake and you try to cover up the mistake, and you take steps to make sure that it's not discovered, and or you just ignore it, that's when it becomes malfeasance to me. If you make a mistake, own up to the mistake, take steps to correct it, and then we can all move on. But that's not what happens, especially in the higher levels of the FBI. That is not what happens. They either ignore it. They'll bring down attorneys from the Office of General Counsel, OGC, and they will fight it in court, and they will drag it on for years if they can, until they get some sort of a court ruling that compels them to do something. When I testified in the 2015 hearing, there was an attorney sitting to my right. He was kind of in the center of the panel. He's a prominent whistleblower attorney in Washington, D.C., and he reported in his part that there really have only been 3 positively adjudicated whistleblower cases in the history of the FBI. Okay, of all the century-long history of the FBI, there's only been 3 times where there's been a whistleblower and it's been adjudicated to the favor of the whistleblower. 3 times in the entire history. And the average of what it took to get there was 10 years. So that's why so I guess one of the remedies is to bring it in front of Congress and expose it to the world, like we did in that case, and like the whistleblowers are doing now.
Well, and I'm sure even just conversations like this, right? I truly see, and I mean, this is a huge reason I started my podcast 3 years ago, was that I truly see that podcasts are going to be like the next form of media. Like, I think that, the corporate media is it's at a slow burnout. And I just see that as ending at some point in the future. And conversations like this are where people are more in tune. They want to hear more of like getting those ideas out, hearing your story, hearing other people's story, because I think it makes it more concrete as opposed to just, snap opinions that you hear in the media, and, they'll just clip stuff up and you kind of can't really tell. So, I mean, I appreciate you kind of, like coming forth with all of this, wanting to speak on it. Is there, and maybe that brings up another interesting question, like, is there any fear that, talking about this publicly could bring forth other things from the FBI, that they might want to, knock on your door and make up some other stuff to get you? Is there any fear there at all by talking about this?
There is some fear. I mean, I'm in a position though that all of my children have graduated college, and I have 11 grandchildren. A 12th is on the way.
Congrats.
Really, if anything happened to me, my family will be fine. unlike a lot of the current employees of the FBI who are dependent not only on the job, but they keep the job and they carry it to retirement. Because you don't want to, losing that pension is a tough thing. And a lot of these whistleblowers that you see coming to Congress directly have, some of them have, 10 years or more experience in the FBI, and they're kind of on the downhill slope towards retirement and getting that pension. And like Nicole Parker is one of the whistleblowers. I think she's working for Fox News, as a matter of fact. But I worked with Nicole in the Miami field office. We worked on a case together, a murder on the high seas, investigation on a cruise ship. There was a murder on a cruise ship, and I was the forensic examiner that supported the case. But I mean, even back then, we were talking like we could see the handwriting on the wall and see how things were going down in the FBI, and we were focused on all the wrong stuff. When Comey came in, he created a brand new section at headquarters called the Diversity and Inclusion section. Like a lot of organizations, they created these sections, and really to the detriment. And the idea, it's just like communism. The idea is on paper is good, but the implementation has unintended consequences. And when you're putting a lot of your resources into trying to get the right demographic numbers, you're cutting corners necessarily. You have to be cutting corners on other things that you're focused on, like competence, integrity, and so you end up getting a workforce that is, well, maybe it's biologically diverse, as if that matters. But in advancement, so you have recruitment and hiring and advancement at all, dictated by the diversity and inclusion section and their policies. And it's like, why can't we just get people who want to do the job, who are loyal to the United States of America, and will work hard day in and day out, and just, have those be the criteria, Yeah. So anyway, we could see, and people the good people that have moved on, retired, and there's, obviously there's a lot of retirees from the FBI, and we're looking back on this once great organization that's at the center of our resume, and we're like, I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe they're making this decision, but it's a result of this, years long dissension into, perversion and everything that they're not supposed to be focused on.
Because I mean, touching on that DEI point, right, is I know I've seen that with my dad has an architect firm here in Pittsburgh, and I know that one of the jobs he was bidding on is like they had a requirement that 25% of your workforce had to be Black, and for him in Pittsburgh, there's only like 2%, I think, of the architects are Black. So it's like, how in the world are you even supposed to make up? And he's an extremely diverse workforce too. He has people from Asia. He has women. He has like all of it, essentially, like people who speak multiple languages. Like it's insane. So, that's always like a very tricky subject, because to me, it's like, it seems like it's coming from a good place, but then when you enact it, it's like, what's the consequence of it? And I mean, I'm on board. It feels like, competency should come before our skin color, before our ethnicity, before our sex, whatever it is. And then to kind of go into what you're talking about at the end there about, all of these, it seems like when, at least for me, from an outside, because I love studying history. I love studying like large businesses and organizations. It seems like when they become so big that they start cutting corners, they start making decisions that the people at the bottom are like, why would you do this? So do you see, in regards to maybe like the FBI, the CIA, do you think they're at a place where they could make these adjustments for them to become, let's say, more spiritual? Or is it something where we just need to tear them apart and scatter them to the wind and start from scratch?
That's very difficult. I mean, for those who have worked inside of these behemoth organizations, I think it would be very difficult to like dismantle and then start from scratch. But what you can do is appoint good leadership at the top. And that good leadership can then surround himself or herself with good leaders, that work for him. And then those trusting them to then put people around them that are good. And then it's got to be from the top. And I think if you do that, I mean, because the FBI structurally, institutionally, is still very, very good. I mean, the process we put in place are, I don't want to, brag too much about, the computer forensics, but the computer analysis response team, which are the computer forensic examiners in the FBI, are, the best in the business. And we bring in people from the military. There's a lot of good institutional knowledge, but structurally the processes that we have in place are very, very good. Our evidence control and our evidence management is very good. Our ability to manage cases and multiple cases across multiple jurisdictions and states, the process of requesting work to be done in another field office and getting that communication back. It's really structurally is very, very good. And the people that are at the pointy end of the spear doing the work day in and day out are by and large very, very good people. But it's the leadership and the ones that are at the top making these dumb decisions and getting into trouble personally on a regular basis, and then covering up their mistakes or covering up, maybe there's mistakes made down at the pointy end of the spear, but they won't admit it. They'll fight it in court. It's just terrible. But I can't see the total dismantlement of it. But I can see a large scale replacement of leadership. The main problem and the tricky part of that is continuity. The people that know the business processes of the organization. They have to be. You have to be competent, but you also have to have integrity. It's almost like, well, I can deal with somebody who has integrity and is willing to learn, but maybe doesn't have all the competencies. They can learn the competencies, but they need to have the integrity first. I think that's the most important thing is just getting good people at the top, and like I said, maybe preserving that cadre of people with integrity by not making it so complicated to go up in the ranks, to advance, moving your family back and forth from, different field offices to headquarters. So anyway, I think that would, nobody's going to be appointing me as director of the FBI, but I could certainly go to training division and help fix training division for sure.
Well, I mean, with that being said, we do have a new president coming in January. So if you had Donald Trump's ear, are there certain people who you would recommend or who you would at least like to see being appointed as the director or any of these other higher positions?
I think General Michael Flynn would be a great director of the FBI.
Was he there? Didn't something happen to him? Didn't he get investigated for something?
Yes, he was. During the right after the 2016 election, he started to make contracts with his counterparts in Russia and other countries. That's just part of the transition, and so he was being investigated, and like the Russian collusion hoax, everybody in the Trump campaign was being investigated, basically. but then what happened with General Flynn is that, he was like, well, he didn't do anything wrong. James Comey sent two investigators to meet with him to basically to entrap him into saying something wrong, and to, about the contacts that he's had with his Russian counterparts. And they basically said, okay, we're going to indict you for, obstruction of justice. I think it was USC 1001, I think is what he was charged with. I don't quote me on that, but basically they got him on something, and he's like, no, I didn't lie. I told you what I knew at the time, and I was very open about it. Of course, they were listening to his conversations, but the thing is, they went after his son, and they said, we're going to indict your son if you don't plead guilty. And so he had to plead guilty.
How are they able to do that? How are they able to indict his son?
They, I forgot what his son, what the problem was with his son. I think it was some white collar crime issue or some financial thing. I can't remember what it was, but I remember that they were leveraging that part to get to him to plead guilty. And so, and that's what they, we talk about the FBI being corrupt, but you also have a Department of Justice full of very ambitious prosecutors called Assistant United States Attorneys, AUSAs, who are very ambitious, and they want to make a name for themselves, and they go after, big game. We talk about the weaponization of government, right? With Jim Jordan's Select Committee on the Weaponization of Government. And everybody thinks, okay, well, you can weaponize the government against your political enemies in an attack, but you can also weaponize the government as a defense weapon, to shield your wrongdoing. And you can also use a weapon to go after big game. And I think people like General Flynn is big game. And even Keith Raniere, which is, someone who was vilified in the media. As I was approaching retirement, I didn't keep up with any current events, but I later learned that this was someone who was just excoriated in the media and was, considered a high-profile target by the FBI. And so there are a variety of awards to be had, and promotions, and what we call quality step increases, which is kind of like a promotion within your grade, or within grade increase that follows you for the rest of your career. There's all kinds of incentives to get your guy. And on the DOJ side, it's the same thing. You get to move up in the DOJ to be a senior prosecutor or a managing AUSA, we'll call it MAUSA, managing AUSA, or, leave completely and take a, 7-figure job somewhere, which is what a lot of them do. So it's, the incentives are there to do the wrong thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just, so what, like you're saying, the incentives are there. And then especially it seems like if you're missing that moral compass too, that would make it easier to take those baits. Cause I know in my life, I got to a point where I was a computer engineer as well. Not as many degrees as you, but just one. But I was a software engineer for General Atomics. And I got to a point in my life where like I had enough money, I was living in a perfect situation, but there was like a piece of me that still felt unfulfilled, right? Like there was something bigger to pursue. And it seems to me like, you bring this back to a spiritual corruption within the FBI. And it sounds to me, even in these situations, you're talking about Michael Flynn going after their kid. Like, I feel like, anyone who has a family wouldn't want to do that. Like you wouldn't want to like go out of your way to make this, like do this illegal thing to someone else's son in order to get a leg up, so I mean, and maybe that's a part of the issue, right? We were talking about earlier where you're saying how they have to move away, move back, move away. That's not going to constitute a stable, healthy relationship within a family. And so if you break that, you might find yourself struggling for meaning. And then the only thing that's left there is your career, because you're sacrificing everything for that career. So then, well, why not hurt someone else's family? Because you were hurt in the pursuit of your career, so why not do it to someone else?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess there are a lot of different reasons for lacking morality, lacking a moral compass. Um, and I being on the front lines of a lot of bad stuff. I mean, the computer forensics examiners in the FBI, they support all programs from counterterrorism, white collar crime, organized crime, but the half of all of the devices and the work that is done in computer forensics in the FBI is child pornography. And so, you get some insight into, how bad human beings can be. So, when you work in this field and before I was a forensic examiner, I was a regular special agent investigator. I had my own cases where I would ask the forensic examiners to work on my case. So I come from it from both angles. I was an investigator, special agent investigator. I was also an assistant legal attaché overseas in San Salvador. I worked in headquarters on a case management, moving our case management system from a system of paper to an electronic system of record. Of course, I was unit chief at the FBI Academy. So I really value the breadth of experience that I have there in the FBI. But the whole time we're always cognizant, or should be, that we're dealing with human beings. One, and that every human being deserves respect. We always treat everybody nicely. At the pointy end of the spear. When we're arresting people, we are very, very nice in the academy. They teach us to be nice, courteous always. But what I've seen lately is when these good agents are then told to do things that, they know they shouldn't be doing. Like, for example, the January 6th, protesters that are there. They're going and knocking on doors of people that were just, they didn't go in the Capitol. They didn't, they were just there. And maybe they posted something on social media. Well, then they get a door knock. And that's very intimidating to get something like that from the FBI. There are a lot of videos, you may have seen them, where people are recording this. The FBI comes up. They're very nice, they're very courteous, and the person says, okay, and they say, can I come in? Nope, we're going to stay right here, and you're being recorded. Okay, well, we're from the FBI. Can I see your credentials? Well, and then they start getting a little cagey about that, and then come to find out they're knocking on the door because of something they posted on social media. If it was threatening, that would go into an affidavit and that person would probably be arrested. But it's just like the use of intimidation that's happening right now. And these agents that are going out and doing this should really be pushing back. I certainly would be. Steve Friend, who is one of the FBI whistleblowers that have reported on he was a member of SWAT. And he was being told to go after these, January 6th grandmothers and with SWAT, I was in Miami when they went after Roger Stone. Okay. And they had two flavors of SWAT. Actually, they had this water-based SWAT team that came in from one side of his house, and then a land-based SWAT team come over in the front of his house. And of course, CNN was there before the FBI was there. So that tells you something, right?
Yeah.
And this guy's got, there's not a scintilla of evidence that this guy has ever been violent to anybody, and they send in SWAT. it's being abused. The process is now being abused, and I'm really disappointed that more whistleblowers aren't coming forward and stepping up and refusing to do this stuff, and then coming forward as whistleblowers. There are a lot. I mean, there's like, I don't know, I think there's more than 50 whistleblowers now in the queue, but that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be, we have to follow lawful orders, but there should be really some pushback on this ridiculous stuff. And it's kind of encouraging to see that the public now knows their rights. Like, okay, if you have a warrant, you can come in. Obviously, if you don't have a warrant, have a nice day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The FBI cannot exist, cannot do their job at all without the help of the public. There's just not enough agents to investigate all of the crimes that they have, all the violations of statute that come under their purview. There's not enough. So we have to rely on the cooperation of the public, and bringing in confidential human sources, informants. I was also the confidential human source coordinator in Miami. But we are absolutely rely on others to help us to do this, to do the job. And I think the FBI has now alienated the public, and it's the trust is at an all-time low of the FBI.
I mean, that's crazy too, right? Is like the trust seems like an all-time low with everything. I mean, in the last 4 years, doctors, there's no trust there. FBI, no trust there. CIA, I mean, how much information's coming out about JFK and 9/11? No trust there. Bringing in our government to the mix, I mean, no trust there. And I don't know, it seems like it's priming us for a very interesting, let's say, moment in time where this is all going to come to a head. It seems like at something. And, the other thing I think that's kind of feeding into this, you kind of touched on, and we touched on it when I was talking with Alan Dershowitz, was he had a book. It was called Price of Principle. And so like that idea of like, what was it? Like integrity, being integrity, like following your moral compass, right? Like,
right.
No matter the consequence of what that entails, like being able to put your foot down when you need to put your foot down, because it sends a signal, from a spiritual place, right? It creates a ripple, right? It creates that butterfly effect that maybe someone else will do it, another person will do it. And maybe there aren't enough people in a position to be able to say no, or to say like what's going on. They have family, they have a mortgage, they need the pays good, so they need the money. And I get it. Like I get how difficult it is, but it seems like the more you're willing to compromise your moral compass, the more quickly you're going to find yourself in a dark place and compromising other things that maybe are more important to you, because it's like slippery slope. It's like once you start down that path, the momentum is going to keep taking you in that direction.
Especially for those who have families. Like I mentioned, I have 4 children and almost 12 grandchildren. To me, it's very important for them to know what kind of a person I am. And it's important for them to know that when it came time, to do my part in making this world a better place, that I did everything I could. Through the FBI and their normal practices, but also when things went wrong in the FBI, in order to help fix the problem, I exposed the problem, and I exposed it in such a way that those who came after me are now benefiting from that. And like I said, I have, being able to go to Congress and testify as a serving FBI special agent against the FBI. I don't think it's ever been done. Former FBI agents have come in and so forth, but I don't think a serving active duty FBI agent has ever gone to Congress and testified against the FBI. But I was already at that time, my children were in, 2 of them had already graduated and 2 of them were still in college. But, I had built up my credentials to the point where if they did decide to fire me for doing that, I would land somewhere, and we would make it. We have a good family. We're strong. We're together. We have a good network of people that support us, and I think we would be absolutely fine. As a Christian, I always believe, God, who created the entire universe, has managed to take care of my little family just fine. So, but there are people, good people in the FBI that, like you said, they're very hesitant because they're not in that situation. Maybe they don't have a support network as strong as I did. Maybe, um, they're still very dependent on the security of having this government job to get them through financially, and so forth and so on. So the real heroes are those that lift their voice and raise their hand in spite of all that.
So
And
what
they
would
still
be,
do the right thing.
yeah, what would be some good advice maybe now that you've been on the other side of this? And I'm sure a lot of this is going to be easier said than done. But if, let's say there's a 30, 32, 33-year-old, agent, special agent, but they have a family and they're noticing things going wrong, like what is good advice that you could offer that person?
Well, I would advise them to expand their network of support to family, church, friends. You know, uh, build that network of people that will support you. Also, build your credentials. Get, if there's a training, any kind of training opportunity. One of the great things that the FBI does is that it will pay for training. Within the FBI, there's training, but also they will pay for external um, uh, certifications. They'll pay for full degrees. My PhD was paid for by the FBI. So take advantage of all of those training opportunities, any opportunity you can to build your credentials, build your experience. You'll be in a much better position to then, if you ever see anything, that any example of waste, fraud, and abuse, you'll be in a much better position. You'll have your network of family, church, and friends, but you also have your credentials. So that'll put you a lot more at ease than someone who doesn't have all of that. And if they raise a hand, they know what's going to happen to them. One of the things, to Senator Grassley's credit, is that he flat out asked Deputy Director Kevin Perkins, who was on the panel after my panel. He said, will the FBI commit to not further retaliating against Dr. Kiper as a result of his testimony at this hearing today? And put him on the spot. And the deputy director, of course, was kind of shamed into it, maybe, but he said, "No, yeah, well, we're not gonna retaliate against him for this. We want to be better. We want to,
Yeah, of
he
course.
gave all those things.
Yeah, all the
But
little,
Congress, that's something else. Is know what your rights are as a whistleblower, and do it the right way. You can't just see some example of waste, fraud, and abuse, and then go right to the papers and report it. You could get fired and you're not going to be protected. You need to know who to contact. Anybody in Congress, your supervisor, anybody in your upline, in your chain of command. So be familiar with the process of what to do to make a protected disclosure. Some of the people that have come after me, even before the current wave of whistleblowers, they have told me, they've contacted me, and they said that I have to give you a lot of credit. I was successful in my whistleblower case because of what I learned from your case.
there you go.
So the things that went wrong,
Yeah.
and so I said, well, that's great. That's I'm so glad that you were able to learn from my experience and some of the things that I didn't do right to protect myself. But educate yourself on the law, and in the process and how to make these disclosures. Build your network, build your credentials, and you'll be fine.
They say that smart men learn from their mistakes, wise men learn from other people's mistakes. So, so I'm sure at
That's
some
good.
level they appreciate you being the trailblazer for that. Um, yeah, but Dr. Rip Kiper, I mean, this seems like a good place to kind of close on. I mean, I really appreciate you being here. I love leaving my guests a little bit of time. If you want to speak to the audience, things to promote, I'll drop your links down
Sure.
below so people can find
Yes.
you. But any final thoughts or words, the floor is yours.
Sure. Sure. We didn't talk specifically about the Keith Raniere or NXIVM case,
Mm.
but it is an important case. I believe it could be a watershed moment when the truth comes out about what happened in this
We
case.
talked about it briefly with Alan Dershowitz.
Yes. Did he mention what the government has admitted to in this case?
I don't think so, no.
So, I mean, we've known for a while that the FBI has, well, while in the custody of the FBI, some evidence that was used at trial was actually changed. Okay, and that actually was brought up at trial, right? Basically, we're talking about two devices. We're talking about a camera with a camera card, and we're talking about an external hard drive that supposedly held backup copies of photographs. The external hard drive is where, in this case, they found child pornography or alleged child pornography. But the two devices that we're talking about here is just basically the camera card and the external hard drive. Well, we know from the FBI's own forensic reports that the camera card was changed. The last access, you understand computers, the last access dates were updated 6 months after it was seized. Okay, so that tells you that at the very least, it was accessed at least one time, if not more. We can see from the chain of custody that several people who had no authority to review that evidence checked it out of evidence control, what we call an evidence control facility or evidence control unit, checked it out without, they were not computer forensic examiners. They were not trained in forensics and how to preserve the evidence. They checked it out for review, according to the chain of custody, without any explanation. Checked it back in. So that happened several times. And then the last time it happened was 6 months after it was seized. And one of the responses from the government in these filings that have happened, I'm not part of like the legal team, but I have been, they copy me on the legal filings and, and get my input into the technical issues. But in one of the responses from the government, they actually admitted something that I have never seen in my 20-year career in the FBI. Okay. And it's two sentences. I'll just read it to you. Okay. All right. And I think I have it close by here. Yes. Okay. So they had to admit that they accessed the card without a write blocker. They had to admit it. Forensically, you can't get away from it. But they said the access wasn't for, nefarious purposes. So here's what they said, okay, in this response. This access was not the result of law enforcement tampering, as Raniere's motion claims. Rather, having no reason to believe that the metadata of the contents of the camera card had any evidentiary value, law enforcement agents directed that a photograph technician copy the photographs from the camera card in order to provide the photographs more expeditiously to defense counsel. Unquote. Okay, that's what they said. Yeah, and you're like, what?
Wow.
So here's what they admit in just these two sentences. Okay, they admitted they intentionally circumvented the CART process, Computer Analysis Response Team, CART. All digital evidence goes to CART for preservation first, before it's reviewed by anybody. It has to be preserved. CART then, on the preserved evidence, on the preserved copy, they point their tools at it and they extract information and they parse the information to make it human readable, and they have a lot of tools for that. But they circumvented that entire process and gave it to some photograph technician who, by the way, is not on the chain of custody. Okay? Not on the chain of custody. Unidentified. This person's credentials, this person and this person's credentials were never presented at trial. And this is the person that altered the evidence, okay? So they admit they circumvented CART, the only device in the entire case, the only digital evidence device that they treated this way, okay? Every other device was sent right to CART, but not the camera card, okay? They circumvented CART. They intentionally gave it to a person who was not trained and not authorized to review it. They intentionally left this person off of the chain of custody, hid this person, basically concealed this person. And now in the second sentence there, they're saying, well, they did this because they didn't think the metadata was important. Well, the metadata on the external hard drive where the supposed child pornography was, the metadata was the only forensic evidence that they used to date those pictures to the year 2005, where the woman depicted in those pictures would have been 15 years old. Okay? So, so on one hand, that was what they relied upon for the core of their case. And by the way, Keith Raniere is serving his 120-year sentence right now. Okay, so they're saying metadata was crucial to the case. Like, gosh, you can't change timestamps, right?
Yeah.
So you have file system timestamps that like Windows controls, right? But then you have internal timestamps in the EXIF data of the photograph itself. That's what the camera puts there. And they're saying, well, that's super reliable. I taught my grandson how to do it in like a minute. It is super easy. It is. But they testified. They lied in trial, and they said that it was very reliable. But this new thing, this was just disclosed. This fact that they had given it to this person who wasn't on the chain of custody, unidentified, couldn't be brought to trial to be not interrogated, but direct examination or cross-examination. This is outrageous that they were able to do this.
Sounds
and
illegal.
the judge in this case is just like not even addressing it. Like, how can you sweep this under the rug? We talked about accountability. There needs to be some accountability.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about this, Alan Dershowitz was saying that there needs to be some procedure changes, right? Or being able to review cases like this a little bit more expediently. Do you feel like there's any changes on behalf of maybe the CART process or anything within the investigation part of this, such that these types of tampering can't occur? Or like, is there something there that could be updated?
Well, I failed to mention that not only was I a digital examiner in the FBI, but I also taught the digital examiners, and I taught the teachers of the digital examiners. Okay, so I taught them how to teach digital forensics, and this is all run out of the FBI lab, or not the FBI lab, but the Engineering Research Facility, Office of Training. Operational Technology Division. Okay, Operational Technology Division is where this is all managed. But, it was, I know what procedures there are because I taught the teachers of those procedures to teach them so I know what they've been taught. I know what the training is. I know what the policies are, and the training and the policies are sufficient. Okay? They are absolutely sufficient. The problem is they just didn't follow the procedures. Chain of custody is like paramount, right? Preserving the evidence is paramount. We consider the preservation of evidence, putting a write blocker, a device that prevents the alteration of the digital evidence. That process of putting a write blocker between your computer that you're doing the examination on and the evidence, that process it's called a critical process, because if it is compromised or you skip it, then now you're risking the entire case. You're risking the admissibility of that evidence. All right. So when I taught in the program, and if any of the examiners failed to use a write blocker on the evidence, it is an automatic fail. They could be the best at finding, doing the analysis and finding the relevant evidence within, the forensic copy that's been made, and they could be great at the tools and everything. But if they fail to put a write blocker on the evidence, they fail. That's how important it is, and that's what happened in this case.
It's so wild to me. And
Yeah.
I mean, did this just get overlooked in the original sentencing?
Well, if I, only had access to the transcripts, and
Okay.
yes, on cross-examination, the FBI's expert witness, who was the forensic examiner in this case, he did admit that, well, yeah, it does kind of seem like, it was altered in the custody of the FBI, and then it was just like dropped. And I'm not an attorney. I'm not in their shoes. I wasn't part
Yeah.
of the stress of everything that went on. But to me, if I was there, I would immediately we have to move to dismiss this piece of evidence, to
Yeah.
exclude this piece of evidence, because not only was it altered while in the custody of the FBI, but it was delivered to that forensic examiner by his own admission in an unsealed container. So it was in an unsealed baggie, in an unsealed box, and he has no idea who last unsealed it. In the FBI, when we are transferring evidence from one person to another, you have to, if you open the evidence, you have to reseal it before you give it to somebody else. You reseal it, and then you put your initials and the date across the seal. Then the next person can say, "Oh, okay, well, this person, signed the seal on the evidence, and they're the next person in the chain of custody. Okay, this is good." And then you have confidence in the evidence. Right? That's the way it's supposed to work. You have a chain of custody, and then you have this sealing and unsealing procedure, and neither one of those were followed in this case. And that's just, really the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And when this new revelation came with this photograph technician who's not even on the chain of custody, is the one who had it at the last access, when the last access times were updated. This person, this unnamed person, they're saying was the one, this photograph technician was the one who was responsible for that. But don't worry, it wasn't for nefarious reasons.
Of
Well,
course.
let's put that in front of a jury and see if it makes a difference. I think it probably would have.
Definitely. Well, I'll tell you this. I can tell from my perspective, it seems like, and it looks like you and, Mr. Dershowitz are doing an excellent work here. I mean, preserving the justice system to the best that you guys can. And I guess my hope is that by this podcast, both your podcast getting out there, people can be more aware of maybe the biases that we can take into place when we're just reading headlines or skimming off the top of stuff, and realizing that it's a lot more complex than just what it says on the headline or just like the top layer. So I definitely want to at least say I appreciate it. And maybe someone listening can reach out to you guys, provide some assistance if there's anything that they can do. So hopefully that's there as well.
100% agree. The biggest thing is accountability. We need to raise awareness about this, and then we need to hold them accountable. No more covers up, no more. Alan Dershowitz one time said in one of the interviews we did together, he said that the biggest problem in the judicial system right now are these judges. These judges that just want the case to go away, just want resolution of the case, and they'll accept just about anything to just make the case go away. They're not thinking. It's not just a technical problem. Of course, they don't understand like the computer forensics part, maybe, but the fact that they won't even look at obvious malfeasance where you're giving evidence to someone who's altered it, and then you conceal the identity of that person. withhold that from the jury. I mean, and you're not even going to consider that.
We're
To me,
talking
it's
about
just outrageous.
and we're talking about people's lives too. It's not
Yes.
it's not like these judges. It's like, oh, like maybe it's money, but like when you're like money's it's definitely important, but like the next layer is like lives. If you're talking about people's lives, their livelihood, their public reputation, I mean, that's a whole nother layer to it as well.
Their freedom.
Yeah, their freedom. Yeah, the thing that this entire country is based upon.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Kiper, I appreciate it. How can the individual person maybe help in this endeavor?
Well, I was asked recently to create an X account, so I am on X. Rick Kiper. I'm the only Rick Kiper out there, I think, on social media. So I'm on X. I'm on Truth Social. Those are the two main ones. People can look me up there and contact me through there if they like. Also, I have a website, kipertechusa.com, and spelled KIPERTEK USA.com. People can contact me there as well. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, Dr. Rick Kiper.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate your time, Doctor. I mean, thanks for being here. It was definitely I know I learned a lot here. So thank you so much for being here. Guys, go check out his stuff. Share this for sure. Even if, you don't want to reach out to him, I know sharing this, getting the message out there any way you can, whether it's on your X account, whether it's on your Instagram page, whatever it is, sharing this knowledge at least brings awareness to it. So I really appreciate you guys all being there. And if for any reason we don't talk in this dimension, I know for sure that we'll see each other in the 6th dimension.
Very good.